Okay, hi everyone. Welcome back to Shifting the Conversation, a lecture series that Wichita State ShiftSpace Gallery is putting on that showcases student research being done here at WSU. So today with us we have Sandra Carlo, who is a senior at Wichita State University, graduating with an Honors Baccalaureate, concentrated in women's studies and dance, as well as a certificate in film studies. This past year, she was involved with bringing MBLG, the largest queer college conference in the United States, to Kansas for the first time and serves as a German Academic Exchange Service Young Ambassador. Pre-COVID-19, she volunteered regularly with positive while being employed at Strange Tides Bookshop. She was awarded a Cohen Enhancement Grant as well as an undergraduate research and creative activities grant to support her research Next Level Visual Shit, a movement-based exploration of sexuality in popular media. Post-graduation, Sandra plans on attending the University of Roehampton in London, England, to pursue a master's in dance theology. Hello, Sandra.
Hello.
Do you want to go ahead and share your presentation with us?
Yeah. Well, here, I'll wait just a moment before I share it. But I'm really tempted to ask how everyone's doing, but I feel like that's rather disingenuous when many of us are perhaps not great and we don't really have the space to process that. So instead, I'd like to open with a poem by one of my favorite authors, if that's okay. Her name is Marge Piercy, and it comes from The Moon is Always Female. But I really enjoy the way that she writes about pleasure, and this specific poem encapsulates the pleasure of waiting perhaps months for something to happen and celebrating the small details you can in the meantime so it feels applicable. So I felt like I'd read it. It's called The Cast Off. This is a day to celebrate can openers, those lantern-jawed, long-tailed tools that cut through what keeps us from what we need. A can of beans trapped in its armor taunts the nails and teeth of a hungry woman. Today, let us hear hurrahs for zippers, those small shark teeth that part politely to let us at what we want, the tape on packages that unlock us birthday presents, envelopes we slit to thaw the frozen words on the tundra of paper. Today, let us praise the small rebirths, the emerging groundhog from the sodden burrow, the nut picked from the broken fortress of walnut shell, itself pried from the oily fruit shaken from the high turreted city of the tree. Today, let us honor the safe whose door hangs ajar, the champagne bottle with its cork bounced off the ceiling and into the soup tureen, the Victorian lady in love who has removed her hood, her cloak, her lace boots, her stockings, her overdress, her underdress, her wool petticoat, her linen petticoats, her silk petticoats, her whalebone corset, her bustle, her chemise, her draws, and who still wants to. Today, let us praise the cast that finally opens, slit neatly in two like a dinosaur egg, and out at last comes somewhat hairier, powdered in dead skin, but still beautiful, the lost for months body of my love. All right, let's do this. Okay. So next level visual shit, a movement-based exploration of sexuality in popular media. Today we are talking about sex, dance, and music videos, and kudos to anyone who knows which iconic 2009 song my title comes from. As Carter introduced me, my name is Sandra Carlo. I am passionate about accessible arts education, soup, and all things Britney Spears. At Wichita State, I completed an Honors Baccalaureate. If you've been watching previous installments of Shifting the Conversation, it is the same degree that Sarah Mios completed. The Honors Baccalaureate is an interdisciplinary endeavor that allows for creative approaches to filling the learning gaps present in higher education. As the Cohen Honors College website notes, the Honors Baccalaureate degree program from Wichita State is the only program of its kind in Kansas and one of only of a few offered in the country. It truly is like an underrated gem that Wichita State offers. I decided to concentrate mine in women's studies and dance, paired with a certificate in film studies. I've been uniquely drawn to feminist thought since I was about 17 and am a lifelong dancer. Bringing these two disciplines together provided me with a way to evoke the other in more thoughtful, impactful, and practical ways. I received several points of funding through the college, including a Cohen Enhancement Grant and an undergraduate research and creative activities grant that allowed me to do opportunities like Dance for Social Change, a collaborative performing arts endeavor in Nairobi, Kenya, attending the Institute for Community Action Training through Give Me Dance in New York City, and attending the National Dance Education Organization annual conference in Miami, Florida. All of these opportunities helped me narrow down and select my specific research for today. So I actually first got the idea for studying the longitudinal effects of music videos when I was procrastinating and I was watching music videos from when I was in middle school. It dawned on me how many of these short films featured images of women killing men, mostly motivated by revenge. And it got me thinking about how unapologetic the Me Too movement has been. And it made me wonder if these sorts of images had any influence on the way my generation treats power dynamics. I hold high regard to music videos because dancing and choreography is a huge part of what we see in them. Most people haven't had the access to really see and enjoy professional dance, so it's an accessible way of consuming an art form that I hold dearly to my heart. However, music videos are not considered a valuable way to consume dance, and the choreography featured in them is often chalked down to its commercial nature. I wholeheartedly believe in assigning artistic value to what is mainstream, accessible, and consumed by the general public. My relationship with sex and sexuality is complicated. As a queer person and survivor of sexual assault, the narrative I commonly heard about music videos and feminist spaces is that they're hypersexual and thus harmful. I really firmly reject the idea that any display of sexuality is inherently bad. Sex is complex, power dynamics associated with sex are complex, and the way we as a society respond to messages about sex is complex. I found myself craving a more nuanced and balanced approach to this conversation. So thus, my research proposal. Movement-based messaging is everywhere in mass media, advertising, film, the music industry, etc. Ample conversation has centered around what effects visual hypersexualization has had on young people through social science, but very little on the actual movement creating these images and the possible benefits of their consumption. Exploring current empowerment versus exploitation debates with a focus on the body and utilizing primary dance principles will unlock missing links and add vital perspective to these shifting conversations. By evaluating late 2000s era pop music videos with both a feminist lens and critical dance theory, we can discern the subliminal messaging shared through choreography and to what degree the messaging fits the empowerment exploitation narrative with consideration towards young people who consumed them nearly a decade ago. Essentially, I was asking two questions. What sexual messages are delivered through music video choreography, and what effect has it had over the last decade on young adults 18 to 23? At times I doubted the nature of my research, but I always come back to this quote from Robin Roberts in Sex as a Weapon, Feminist Rock Music Videos. Forms of popular culture should be considered legitimate, if not crucial, sites of feminist inquiry. And I was able to remind myself that not only was my idea to study music videos, to study dance and music videos legitimate, but it is also a crucial conversation to be had. So my three topics of research going into this project were gaze, dance theory, and empowerment versus exploitation studies. I want to talk about each in depth before I talk about my process, but please do use the chat option. Let me know if this becomes too much, like just me reading at you type of thing. So an essential pillar of film studies is gaze. Gaze and spectator theory dictate the politics of how we see what we see and the lens we see it through. My selected literature highlights gender, race, the act of sex, how gaze is manipulated through a video format. Gaze split between gender is one of the most basic examples laid out by the foundational authors. John Berger in Ways of Seeing outlines that a man's presence suggests what he is capable of doing to you, but A woman's presence expresses her own attitude to herself and defines what can or cannot be done to her. Laura Mulvey phases this a bit differently in Visual Pleasure and Narrative Cinema, where she states pleasure in looking has been split between an active male and passive female. That being said, these examples rely heavily on a dichotomy between two genders and operates under a gender binary. And so for the sake of being more gender inclusive, this argument becomes about power. Who holds it, how is it exercised, and who can fight it in a visual space. Sexuality becomes pertinent to this conversation because it's used as a deliberate tool to sell women's bodies in mass media. The woman's sexual passion needs to be minimized so that the spectator may feel that he has a monopoly of such passion. Women are there to feed an appetite, not to have any of their own. Once video is introduced, as opposed to still images, a new spectator-spectacle relationship is formed. According to Uttara Korolawala and Darshan and Abinya, an alternative to the male gaze, stylized poses, movements, and performing conventions ensure an aesthetic difference between the performed and the observer. And Marcia Kinder argues in Music Video and the Spectator, Television, Ideology, and Dream that because of this, music video seems to be forging new codes of spectator relations. All choreographed dance comes down to four main principles. The first element of dance is design. So design has two aspects, space and time. In politics of touch, sense, movement, and sovereignty, Erin Manning explains the body does not move into space and time, it creates space and time, and that there is no space and time before movement. Thus, these principles serve as the root of movement. Once space and time is created, other design elements come into play, including symmetry and asymmetry, combinations of bodies, the stage space, and small grouping. The second element of dance is dynamics. Dynamics is the ingredients which add spice and interest to living as well as dancing. Third element is rhythm. Of all of the ingredients in the art of dance, rhythm is the most persuasive and the most powerful element. And the last main element of dance is motivation. And Doris Humphrey claims that a movement without a motivation is unthinkable. The different types of motivations are displayed through gestures, so social gesture, functional gesture, ritual gesture, and emotional gesture. Without these principles, how they're individually employed depends on stage design, function, and messaging. Video also changes these elements because it transfers dance from a three-dimensional to a two-dimensional experience, with the focal point decided by the videographer, not by the viewer. So music videos require extra consideration when evaluating the aesthetic messaging because it is delivered via a video format. The study of popular culture includes many debates. A seemingly never-ending one is that of exploitation versus empowerment in the face of female sexuality. Extremist approaches split this debate into a good/bad paradigm, where all sexual messaging equals either good or bad with little gray area interpretation. One of my missions of this project is to find a more nuanced approach that centralizes pleasure without glorifying violence. Defining these terms and evaluating their historical significance will allow for a comprehensive conversation about this topic's relevance in video. Music video dialogue is complex, and this debate frequently oversimplifies the messaging. The image of a woman in music videos is more complex than the picture of a woman as a sex object. To reduce popular culture to its worst stereotype and to dismiss it as a site of feminist inquiry is to oversimplify a complex subject. Ultimately, the music video can be subverted to be empowering as opposed to inherently exploitive. Recent film criticism and contextual approach to music videos in terms of their market function demonstrate that the music video form and function are not inherently oppressive to women. More specifically, the depiction of female sexuality by some female performers illustrates the ways in which music video can be appropriated for explicitly feminist concerns, such as the right for women to determine their own sexuality and their right to express pleasure. How does this subversion happen? Through gesture, nuance, tone, and above all, a diffusing sense of humor. Certain female performers construct, or rather deconstruct, the music video form, and in the process, assert a vibrant and inviting female sexuality, a sexuality clearly pleasurable to the performer and under the female performer's control. So music videos can play an essential role in the feminist movement. So we have all this information, now what? I had to choose a sample to apply these ideas to. I struggled for a while with picking my sample because I really wanted to handpick specific videos, but that would have disrupted my study of how the videos have changed over time because I'd have no correlating factors. So what I ended up doing was pulling videos nominated for Best Video of the Year at the Grammys and using the nominees from 2009 and 2019. I chose these years because 2009 was a real foundational year for me. I transferred from being homeschooled to going to public school, and I really clearly remember culture surrounding music during that time period. In 2019, just to get a clear look at the changes over the last decade. These videos included in the sample are Her Morning Elegance by Oren Lavie, Life in Technicolor 2 by Coldplay, Boom Boom Pow by the Black Eyed Peas. If you hadn't figured out where my title comes from, that's it. Mr. Hurricane by Beast, Wrong by Depeche Mode, This Land by Gary Clark Jr., We've Got to Try by the Chemical Brothers, Cellophane by FKA Twigs, and Glad He's Gone by Tuvlo, and Old Town Road by Lil Nas X and Billy Ray Cyrus. So now that I had my sample established, I had to code all of these videos to produce any sort of results. And admittedly, I'm actually in the middle of this process currently, so I don't quite have results yet, but I am excited to talk about my process. My first step in coding is establishing, first of all, does this video have sexual images? Some videos I listed simply do not display sexual images, so they get coded as sexually neutral. For videos that display sexual images, my coding utilizes the 13 basic reasons for having sex outlined in Human Sexuality in a Changing World. These include reasons such as physical, goal attainment, emotional, and insecurity. Sexual iconography that I'm looking out for includes like long, thin, hairless female legs, breasts, mouth, buttocks, bare, hairless male chest, women suggestively caressing parts of their bodies, women pouting and looking unhappy, flowing hair, any sort of leather, vinyl, chains, lingerie, high heels, stockings, mini skirts, bikinis. The next question I asked myself is, how are these sexual images displayed? This is where the dance theory really comes in. I utilize Doris Humphrey's The Art of Making Dances to establish what specific movements are saying. So for example, like what does a hip thrust mean in the context of the video? And the final question I asked myself is, does the person displaying the sexual images embody agency? This, of course, is a more subjective question. It depends on me and my perception, but I think it's clearly displayed in videos. It's really the difference between like Fergie's choreography and Boom Boom Pow and FKA Twigs on a Pole and Cellophane, whereas Fergie's movements are dictated by the way the camera focuses on her breast and simply goes along with the music instead of supporting it. FKA Twigs is a sensual and deliberate display of sexuality that's sending very specific messages of empowerment that also enhance the lyrical value of the song. This does not mean that one is inherently better than the other, but the specific agency draws the line between where an image or message is empowering and where it is exploitive. So, like I said, since this project is still in progress, I can only guess what my results are going to look like. I would like to perform the study again with two modifications. One, having a wider range of videos, having a wider range, and then also maybe being more specific, like videos only from female producers or something like that. And two, including a survey to actually measure young people's responses to these images and how they believe they have affected them. I can myself go through that process and see how over the last decade these videos changing have affected me, but without without doing a survey or interviews, I can't speak to how it has affected young people as a whole. I've been really thankful for the opportunity to completely design this project. Every step of the way was under my discretion with guidance from my wonderful advisors, Jody Simon and Shayla Clausen. I really do believe this work is transformative. How we view media and the images we're being shown matter. Paying attention to how media has changed us matter, and making calls to action to see that performers are granted more agency, and the ways their sexuality is sold also matters. So that's all I've got. Does anyone have any questions?
We can open it up if anyone wants to type it in the chat or just unmute yourself and shout it out. Either way works.
I wanted to ask, obviously, as you said, you weren't able to conduct a survey of other people, but while doing this project, what did you find had affected you in these music videos between 2009 and 2019? How did that change affect you?
Well, I think back to the very specific parts of life that I was in when these like videos were created. So for me, 2009, that's my first year at public school. That is like first year of middle school. That's a very like foundational, that's puberty, that's learning about a lot of these things mean in videos, right? And so to me, that's like opening up this whole new world, and there's a very like specific way that those sexual messages like really mean something and are discerned as truth. Moving into 2019 and maybe seeing a more artistic, more artists being able to really embody that agency, I really see that as like personally with me, like it moves along with like my transformation as a human, knowing that like I can embody my own agency. I can choose when and how I'm sexual, that is not dictated by someone else, by some random producer, that is my own agency. Just going along with that.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
When starting your process, like right at the beginning, what made you choose, oh, these 3 elements are gonna fit perfectly?
Well, I knew that gaze first and foremost was going to be really essential just because of the film studies classes I had taken. It just was such like how we see and what is presented to us, like through what lens, is such an important part of video, because depending on who is showing that video, you can end up with very, very different results, even if they're dealing with the same subject matter. And so I knew that gaze ultimately had to be in there, that it was a must. Dance theory, I didn't know a better way to really involve movement and choreography without just getting down to the root of dance theory. And so that was something with a lot of help from Shayla, consulted modern text, consulted ballroom text, consulted hip hop text, and really formed like, just because there's not a whole lot of good research on commercial choreography, I had to borrow from other genres and really just kind of build my own rubric for what it was I was looking for. And then as far as empowerment versus exploitation, there was a lot of different ways this last one could have gone. It could have gone more into rape culture. It could have gone more into a handful of different feminist principles. But it ended up where it was, I think mainly just because that's what the cultural conversation about music videos boils down to. It's like, oh, this is hypersexual and bad. Oh, this is like super, super empowering and all women should embody this. And that's not necessarily, like, neither of those things have to be true. There can be more of a nuance there. If I were to add a fourth section that I were to really focus on, it probably would have just been how music video, like how the actual act of a video interacts with all of those. So while I tried to include that in those sections, I think that having its own section just really dedicated to the study of the music video would have been helpful. Yeah.
Can I ask something else?
Please do.
So since you had the experience to dance, or at least know the different genres of dance, and myself as a dancer, I've seen like hip hop, just overall it's very like explosive and like show off of your body. And sometimes, or most of the times, that type of dance is used in those videos. And so what are your thoughts of like hip hop is as beautiful as ballet, because as it's like powerful background of dance, but what are your thoughts of like being overused and in such a film that it's now seen as wrong or not so good? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I totally do. I have two main thoughts that I come back to on that, and that it's one, something just because it's sexual doesn't mean it's inherently bad, that sexuality can be good and it can be transformative, and two, that it comes down to the agency. So someone performing a movement because that is a true expression of what they're feeling is very, very different from someone performing a movement because their label tells them they're going to drop them if they don't perform the specific movement, right? And so I think that the agency has a lot to do with it. As far as the public perception, like I said, I like to assign artistic value to what is mainstream and easily accessible. And so just because like the fine art high dance world like doesn't necessarily see that as valuable, doesn't necessarily see that as beautiful as ballet, doesn't really matter to me. I don't really let that like affect my research. It goes back to that quote by Robin Roberts that the study of pop culture is crucial to feminist inquiry. And so from a feminist standpoint, I find that studying these things is crucial and important.
I have another question, if I may. I'm really interested that one of your like ways to code was agency, and I was interested within the study of dance, or maybe within your study, how agency of the performer seems to be a really central element. So, and I'm thinking about other artistic mediums like writing or painting, where we might have the idea of like a death of the author kind of thing, and it's not. I don't know. I'm just really interested to hear about how, yeah, agency is conceptualized and why it's important. This is a long, kind of winding question.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So thinking back to how dance is produced, there's some crossover, of course, but for the most part, you have choreographers and you have the dancers who do the choreographer's movement, who are choreographed on. And so agency comes into play when like you actually have that ability to have a say in what that movement is. So I would say like choreographers who aren't bound by specific like contracts, who aren't bound by really like any sort of specific, like they have the most agency in the dance world, right? Like they can do whatever it is that they want and create whatever it is they want. I think as we dwindle down to the dancer, we see less agency, and it becomes about that relationship between the choreographer and the dancer to establish how, like, what role you play in the decision making of what you are doing. So what we're seeing in music videos specifically is that the singers, the artists, they aren't really granted that choice in what their movement looks like, that's coming specifically not even from the choreographers on set, but that's coming from the producers and the directors down, and that there's really high stakes for dissenting against what is being asked for. And so and I also found, so while yes, it's central to dance, but that was really more central to the how you could measure whether something was exploitive or how something was empowering, was taking that personal agency into effect. In my literature review, I quote it. It's a definition of empowerment from national governmental organizations. I don't really remember the specific, but without looking at it, but agency and the embodiment of agency is one way that they measure what true empowerment looks like. And so being able to translate that to dance was how we figured out how I was going to be able to actually measure that. Does that make sense? I don't know if I quite answered what you're looking for.
No, that totally makes sense. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I have a simple question. I wonder what music video you go back to that you really enjoy, like all aspects that you've been researching within these videos. Is there one that really sticks out as you think is a great or maybe really bad?
My absolute favorite is FK Twig Cellophane. She is on a pole. It is just this magnificent, artistic, beautiful, like, mwah. I love that video so much. I watch it like once a day. The most absurd of them is Coldplay's Life in Technicolor 2. It's all of these like finger puppets, and it's like finger puppets of the band putting on one of their shows for a bunch of children, and all of a sudden there's like all of these fireworks everywhere, and like these planes come in and pick them up, and like shit's just exploding, and these kids are like going crazy, and it's really absurd. And so that's one of them that I was like watching, and I was like, I have no idea what I'm going to do with this. Grammy thought it was one of the best though. Oh, sorry, Camille?
No, you're fine. I wanted to mention that I bet you can find so many videos, but me coming from a Latino background, I don't know, maybe you came across with a lot of reggaeton music videos, and that it's like today, like basically it's a female portrayed with, very just skin. And I don't know, I invite you to just like look at those, and I want to hear what you think.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's definitely one of the limitations of this project, is that what is sexual and what is considered sexual varies so much from culture to culture. Like what is considered highly sexual in like Germany, how that varies from Brazil, like is just astronomical. And so definitely one of the limitations, this is a very like US perspective centric project, but I definitely would be down to watch them and talk with you about it sometime.
Yeah, it's crazy because even the lyrics are so obscene to females, and then you go to a bar and you hear everyone singing it out loud, even girls, and then you're like, are you listening to the song? Like, it's just wanted to mention.
Yeah, no, thank you for that.
Are there any other questions for Sandra today? Yes, good job, Sandra. That was excellent.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, thanks everyone for tuning in, and thank you, Sandra, for an amazing lecture. We loved hearing your research and are excited to see how it evolves in the future.
Thank you. I really appreciated this, Carter.
So.